When the AI revolution or the AI hype started back in December 2022 with the release of ChatGPT, everyone was forecasting the dawn of the many of the current jobs. And one of the affected areas was supposed to be language translation. I mean, in the end, who would like to pay people for someone that can be done faster and cheaper by the machine? Today, I'd like to tell you how AI-based machine translation actually created new work for people and what role did Sitecore Content Hub played in it. My name is Szymon Kuzniak. I'm a senior Sitecore developer at Acton Digital. And last year, I had the opportunity to integrate Sitecore Content Hub with Azure Cognitive Services to enable our client to translate thousands of their products into 15 different languages. Now, how did Content Hub fit into this integration? Was it a problem for us, or was the integration smooth and painful? I will answer all those questions over the next couple of minutes. But first, let's meet our client. Fun fact: before I started preparing this presentation, I was pretty sure that Acme is just a fictional company from Looney Tunes, and this was like a company that makes everything, which kind of seemed like ideal choice for my demo. But it turns out it's actually a Latin word that a lot of companies uses, because in the yellow pages, that's one of the first names that make sense without something different like ah. Anyway, our company makes tools, but it makes them in organized way. So they have separate divisions for different tools. They have one division for hammers, one for drills, and another one for saws. When they went digital, they did it pretty independently. So each of the divisions selected their own product information management system. That was a bit of a painful for the marketing team. The PIM systems were focused on storing raw product data, such as sizes, colors, quantities, qualities, whatever. And the marketing content was done ad hoc whenever and wherever it was needed. And that was a problem for the client to translate the content because it was distributed in many places. At some point, the company introduced Content Hub. That allowed marketers to work on their content in a centralized way and opened the door for automatic translations. Our client requested us to integrate Content Hub with Azure Cognitive Services, but their idea was to have a proof of concept that will enable them to test the translations applied to a real-life product. So we just had a kickoff call and jumped straight into the implementation. Now, when we wanted to add new feature into Content Hub, we needed an action. But the question was, which action should we use? We started with our idea was to start with the action script, which allows us to manipulate content, read the product that should be translated, and write the translations back. The problem was that action scripts are internal integrations, and then they do not allow HTTP calls. We couldn't contact Azure API to get the translations. And that makes sense because HTTP client is sort of a dangerous thing that could kill the Content Hub, the entire Content Hub instance. That's why Content Hub allows API calls. They can make calls in a controlled way by Sitecore, but unfortunately, we are not allowed to process the response. It just makes a call. It meant we couldn't call the Azure API directly. However, we could introduce a middleware that will handle the communication between Content Hub and the Azure APIs. And cold started Azure function with 3 million free executions that happens on a monthly basis. Seems like a perfect choice. And the architecture was pretty simple. First, we use the API call to call our function. Then our function would use API, Content Hub REST API to get product data. Initially, we wanted to pass the data directly to the function, but this turned out to be tricky for multi-language properties that we cared the most. We couldn't just find the correct way. And since this is like additional integration that does not have to perform very well, we decided that this additional call wouldn't be a problem. Once we get the product data, we would send it to Azure API for translation. And the API is extremely simple. It accepts the text for translation, a bunch of languages that we would like to translate to, and we don't even have to provide the source language. We just get the translations from Azure. And once we have the translations, we can again use the Content Hub REST API to save them back in Content Hub and finish our action. Now that we have the middleware deployed to Azure Function, creating an API action was super easy. The other question was, where do we put this action? One of the requirements was that the client wanted to review the translations before they get published. So a state flow for a product seems like an obvious choice. Without giving it a second thought, we have implemented our action as an additional step. So when the product gets created in the PIM system, it gets synchronized into Content Hub. Then the marketers do their work. They create descriptions, titles, everything that needs to be translated. Then it's sent to translation, reviewed, and eventually gets published. Seems easy. The problem is that the client wanted actually translate published product. So when we started demoing this, they weren't really happy because this flow would require that they would have to unpublish their products, send them for translation, and then review them. And after the review, they will be published back again. They didn't want that, but unfortunately for us, the Content Hub action can be used in many different places. So if it didn't work in the state flow, we could easily implement it as a simple button. And that's what we did. Initially, we have our translation implemented as a state flow. The problem was that all the products required to be in very precise state that allows them to be sent for translation. What we did is we removed this state, so the product got back to their original state and created action button that would execute the action. Now, the good thing about that is that right now, the client was able to translate product regardless of their state. So this is what they wanted. They can translate already published products, but also those that were just created. The problem was now that approved products were automatically synchronized with the connector to the website. When we allowed published products to be sent for translation, it means that whenever we get the translation back, it will be automatically published on the website. So that violated the requirement to be able to review the product before they end up on the website. Now, we solved it in a very simple way. For the POC purpose, we implemented a checkbox that has different value in every language. So when the language is translated, the checkbox is being checked by the reviewer. Sorry, when the language is being reviewed, the checkbox is being checked by the reviewer, and only language versions that are approved are getting picked up by the connector and published to the website. This is not maybe perfect solution. We're trying to find out something better, but for the sake of the POC and the evaluation by the client, that works pretty well. Yep. At the beginning, I promised to tell you how this integration actually created new work for the people. And before we implemented this, the client didn't actually consider translating their products because of the expected size of the task and the cost. Having Content Hub allowed us to allow the client to centralize their marketing content and integrate it with Azure Cognitive Services and translate all the products. But even though the translation, value, not value, the quality, yes, that's the word. The quality of translation is really good. It still needs to be reviewed and sometimes fixed by human. And our client actually had to hire additional freelance translators to help them with reviewing and fixing the content. The best part, the whole integration took us about 2 or 3 weeks of work before it could be handed over to the client. And I could say that this really was possible to happen thanks to Content Hub flexibility and openness to integration. That's it from my side. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm open. You can talk to me or even after the presentation. And of course, thanks to our sponsors.